Okay, this is a quick recap of the lesson that we did today in class, common thesis problems, or otherwise known as how to write a crummy thesis statement. These are some of the typical issues that I see in student writing, and I thought we would just have a little fun with it by looking at how not to write a thesis statement, and in doing so, you get to figure out how you should write a thesis statement. So let's get started. Well, what you do is you start with, to write a crummy one, a nice solid prompt that you've already turned into a question. In an earlier podcast, we talked about taking a prompt and phrasing it into a simple question. So I'm going to start with an example from the passage we did today, which was the George Bernard Shaw's letter about his mother's cremation. And here is the prompt that you've already turned into a nice question. How does the author use literary devices such as diction and detail to convey his attitude about his mother and her cremation? Okay, so just so we're clear, we're looking for a couple of different things. We're looking mainly to talk about the author's attitude about his mother and about her cremation. So there's two tasks that you're doing, and you're supposed to not only talk about that attitude, but you're supposed to show how the author uses literary devices such as diction and detail. Remember that when we hear words such as, these are suggestions by the College Board. You are not required to talk about diction and detail, but they're just giving you a heads up that, hey, this exists and it wouldn't be a bad idea to talk about them. Okay? So we've got a nice simple prompt. Let's move forward, see how we can butcher this thing. All right, one way that you can write a crummy thesis statement is to write it in the form of a question. Let's look at a couple of examples. What does George Bernard Shaw's letter convey about the way he feels towards his mother's cremation? Okay, first of all, it doesn't answer the prompt, it doesn't answer anything, but it doesn't even have the totality of the prompt in it. Strike one. Here's another one. Why would the author use such humor to describe such a terrible event? These are actual thesis statements that I've seen students use, and, well, they're just horrible. Now, they're actually very good questions, and they would be very good questions to think about and explore, but they are not good thesis statements because they don't provide the basis for analysis that you can hang on to and use for the rest of your essay. All right, so that's the first way that you can write a crummy thesis. Second way, simply restate the prompt, and this is probably the thing that students do more than anything else. It's pretty easy to fix, which is the good news. So let's look at an example. George Bernard Shaw uses imagery, diction, and metaphor in his letter to reveal his attitude towards his mother and her cremation. Okay, very vague, doesn't tell us anything. It just basically takes the prompt, puts it slap down on the page, and then they would jump in to answer their essay. Problem is, it doesn't show any thinking has gone into this at all. It doesn't reveal what the attitude is. It doesn't reveal what kind of imagery, diction, or metaphor he uses, so it's not very helpful. Third way to create a crummy thesis is to create a very vague list that contains absolutely no argument. Okay, I'm going to highlight a couple of things here that are important. There are two key words here that we're going to focus on. Vague and the lack of argument. Your thesis should always be an argument, something that's not just a simple statement of fact, something that you can take the oppositional statement, or oppositional position rather, for. And you do not want to just create a vague list that doesn't really say anything. Let me show you an example of what this would look like. The author writes about love, loss, and life in the letter about his mother's cremation. Now, where we do see a little bit of nice alliteration with the love, the loss, and the life in the letter, okay, it's not a good thesis statement. It's vague. There is no argument. Of course he's writing about his mother's cremation. The prompt tells you that, okay? This is just evidence of a student kind of floundering about, trying to figure out what they're going to say. And we've all been there. We get that. Fourth way to write a crummy thesis. This is my personal favorite. Make it moralistic. Believe it or not, I do see these quite often, and what they serve to do is turn the reader off right away. Here's an example. George Bernard Shaw clearly loved his mother, as we all should, and discusses her death poignantly. Okay? This is, I think, my all-time favorite. Perhaps if the author had a personal relationship with God, he would not be as concerned with the cremation of his mother. Okay, you can practically feel the student shaking their finger, wagging their finger at George Bernard Shaw, and it's not analysis, it's not what we're looking for. All right, So how do you fix these how do you fix these crummy thesis statements? Let's go back and look at them one by one. Okay, in order to fix the ones that are written in the form of a question, your first step is to state them, is really to just answer the question. Okay, so the way to fix these, simply put, answer the questions. Now, that's the first step. Just because you answer the questions does not mean that you're good to go on your thesis statement, okay? But it is step one in creating a good thesis statement. So what does George Bernard Shaw's letter convey about the way he feels towards his mother's cremation? Lots of different things. It conveys a sense of peace that he has about her well-being. It conveys a sense of wonder that he experiences when he watches it happen. It conveys a sense of the idea that life goes on. We rephrase that, okay, later, obviously. But you start by answering, and then you also have to fit in the last piece of the prompt, which is, how does the author do that? What literary devices does he do? What does he use that? Again, over here is a good question, but it's not a thesis statement. Why would the author use such humor to describe such a terrible event? Okay, if you can come up with the answer to that question, you are on your way to a very good thesis statement. All right, so that's how you fix the first problem. Second problem, restating the prompt. This one I think is my favorite to try and fix. It's the one that's the easiest to fix. It's pretty simple. Okay, all you're going to do is you're going to come in here in your list and you're going to add descriptors in front of the different types of literary devices that you have mentioned, because it shows that you're understanding the way that Shaw is writing. Okay, and you are also going to just, instead of saying in his letter revealing his attitude, you're going to say what his attitude is. Okay, so again, we can say reveal his loving attitude. Not a great word, but it's better than nothing. We can talk about his he's got a, for lack of a better word, they have a very close relationship. They've got a sense of, they have a shared sense of humor. Obviously that doesn't flow, so we probably wouldn't use that. We'd come back to that. But we would talk about what his attitude is and what his attitude is towards her cremation. And what kind of imagery does he use? What kind of diction does he use? He uses diction that is bold, that is lively, because he's using that to contrast the idea that she is dead. He's using diction that is contradictory. He uses metaphor that's contradictory. Okay, so it would take a little bit of work, but as you can see, this is a pretty plain thesis statement until you start adding in some of these descriptors. And it gives your reader an idea that you understand the passage, you understand the tone, and you understand how Shaw has created that tone. Okay, fixing the one where we create a vague list. You know, I don't know if this one is worth fixing. It's not a bad part of an introduction, but you would want to go on and discuss, basically the way you would fix this one is to discuss how the author does that. So the author writes about love, loss, and life. That's just a little vague. I'd want to be specific. I'd want to specify. And I would add something. I wouldn't end the sentence here. I would say the author writes about love, loss, and life, about his mother's cremation, by the use of, and then I would talk about some of the literary evidence that we use, by the use of paradox and biblical imagery or allusions, whatever it is you decide to discuss. Okay? Home stretch. Make it moralistic. Okay? How do we fix these moralistic statements? This one we can fix pretty clearly. We take out this as we should, even though as a mother I do believe you should clearly love your mother. But if you take that out, it becomes a little bit more manageable. manageable. George Bernard Shaw clearly loved his mother and discusses her death poignantly. Again, this would be a better kind of opener instead of a thesis statement. But you could make it a thesis statement by adding, and you can probably anticipate what I'm going to say. Discusses her death poignantly by his use of, and again, you could start your literary elements or discuss a portion of the literary elements. This one right here, perhaps if the author had personal relationship with God, he would not be as concerned with the cremation of his mother. Really, the best way to fix this one is to not have it at all. It's not worth even trying to fix. Okay, so let's recap. We looked at different ways to make your thesis crummy. Now, how to write a good thesis, basically the opposite of everything we just said. You need your thesis statement to be something that you can argue, and you need it to be a statement. Pretty self-explanatory. You need your thesis statement to provide a specific answer to the prompt, to all parts of the prompt. You need your thesis statement to say something that is worth arguing. Okay? Again, you see a common theme. You do not want to just list facts. And finally, you want to avoid personal opinions and vague facts. You want to say something that is worth reading. All right? So the best way is just to practice and to see some student samples of good thesis statements. I think it'd be a good idea if you looked at the George Bernard Shaw passage again and look at the student samples that I gave you in class today. Especially the third one. It has a fantastic thesis statement and it's a very well written essay. All right. Let me know if you have any questions. See you tomorrow.